This is Midrash Rabbah on Parshat Bereishis, and it's entitled, Did Chava ever have a chance against the crafty serpent? So I'd like to ask a basic question. We spent another video talking about whether the snake was really just a snake oil salesman or he was worse, a heretic. Now I want to ask another question. Didn't Chava have the tools to fight back? What was her level of God consciousness? Didn't she sort of feel the majesty and omnipresence of God and the omnipotence of God? She was just created. How could she, listen to those heretical claims by the snake that we covered in that last video, saying things like, God ate from the tree of knowledge, and that's how he became a god. And if you don't eat from it, then some more powerful being will come and take over you. The snake was making God out to be, God forbid, jealous and power hungry. Didn't she have any sense of God's compassion and God's righteousness and justice? Isn't there anything she could say? How did she fall for this? So the first thing we must ascertain is what was their level of spirituality, Adam and Chava, before they ate from the tree. Actually, the Rambam Mor Nevuchim talks about this, and he says something that makes our question even stronger, because he says that they had their ratzon, their will and their desires perfectly aligned with that of God. Whatever God wanted is what they wanted. The Rambam also says that they lived in this very heightened sense of truth, such a intense kind of truth that we can't even imagine what it is in our day and age, especially the fact that we live with so much misinformation and half-truths and outright lies and propaganda. So given all that, it sounds like perhaps they were more vulnerable because they had this very pure faith, and they, only recognized the most highest truth, and perhaps they couldn't relate to deception and lies. So one possible answer is from the Eshad Nechalim, the commentary on the Midrash Rabbah, who says that the snake actually turned eating from the forbidden fruit into a sort of a mitzvah. He characterized it in such a way that a human being was put here to experience the greatest joys and take advantage of all the great wonders that God created. And by not eating from the fruit, you're not following God's will. God wants you to experience with the most intensity whatever it is that he made. And otherwise you'll be disappointing God and not fulfilling your mission here. And then you would have to be replaced by somebody who would. By the way, we know from the way the Torah describes the snake as the craftiest of all creatures that he had already some, moral depravity, but it's probably safe to assume that he himself ate from the tree of knowledge, and that's how he got this even lower level of kind of deceit and dishonesty and corruption. So that's something that enabled him to come up with all these, very deceitful ways of trying to convince Chava to eat from the tree of knowledge. So up to now, we've sort of forced ourselves into a very troubling theological conclusion that perhaps Chava did not have the wherewithal to fight, and because of her purity and her pure faith, she was no match for the deception of the snake. But I'd like to bring another model to argue the opposite, and that is the model of Avram. We know that Avram also had this pure faith, and when he was told in the Akedah to sacrifice his own son, this was antithetical to everything he believed in and everything he was preaching, but yet he stuck to that. And we have a beautiful Midrash that we covered in another lecture where we talked about how the Satan, or just the evil inclination, whatever you want to call it, disguised himself as a human being and so to speak, talked to Avram and said, how could you do such a thing? How could you murder your own child? What are people going to say? You're going to be arrested. Now, of course, it doesn't have to be taken literally that there was a person walking with Avram on his way to the Akedah, but it means that this was a self-doubt that he had, and yet he stuck to his simple faith. So I would say that is a model that you could argue that Chava did have the wherewithal. There's another Midrash that we covered where we talked about how just as some people chased God's presence away from the world, which started with Adam and Chava. So there are others who brought it back, and there was a direct correlation between Adam and Chava and Avram, which I think attests to the same thing, how they are kind of exact opposite approaches, that Chava did not stay loyal to her simple faith, and Avram did. And I was wondering, of course, there's a famous Midrash that, she exaggerated. She told the snake that we're not allowed to touch the tree, we're not allowed to eat from it. And he pushed her against it and said, you see, just like you are allowed to touch it, you are allowed to eat it. So why did the Midrash make such a big point of this? Perhaps this was the opening. Perhaps once, what she thought was something that she stood for was clearly proven wrong. So it was an opening for her to start, not knowing and being confused is about what her role really is and what the truth is, and even suspicious of what this tree really represents and the prohibition of eating it. Perhaps she was now open to this message that there's something that she could be missing out on if she didn't eat from the tree. So I'd like to conclude with a redefinition of the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And I'd like to propose, and this does not have any midrashic source, but I feel like the main message we could take away from this story is that we have to be vigilant in life, that there are many times when things are going to be proposed to you that seem good, but it's actually evil. And the evil is couched in goodness. And I could even go so far as I said, to redefine what the tree means. What does it mean, the tree of knowledge of good and bad? It means that the knowledge that you get once you eat from this tree, and this is what humanity has been like ever since then, is that we have now the ability to present ideas and to try to persuade people to do things that are really bad for them, and we couch it in righteousness. And this deception is now, as we said, slithering its way through humanity ever since Chava ate from this tree. Have a great Shabbos.